Pocahontas, a Native American woman notable in colonial American history, was a daughter of Powhatan, the chief of a network of tributary tribal nations encompassing the Tidewater region of modern-day Virginia. She is best known for her association with the colonial settlement of Jamestown and her legendary involvement with Englishman John Smith, a leader in the colony. Now, according to legend, Pocahontas saved his life in 1607 when he was captured by Powhatan's men. Smith had claimed that he was about to have his head struck with a stone, but Pocahontas intervened by placing her head upon his, an act which he interpreted as saving him from execution. A debatable story, perhaps. Either way, Pocahontas later played her own role in fostering relations between the Powhatan tribes and the English settlers, including during her capture by the English in 1613, during which she converted to Christianity and took the new name Rebecca. In 1614, she married tobacco planter John Rolfe, which helped establish a period of relative peace between the settlers and the natives. In 1616, she traveled to England with Rolfe, where she was presented at a court and celebrated as an example of a, quote, civilized savage, in hopes of stimulating investment in the Jamestown settlement. But of course, there's a little bit of myth and a great amount of nuance, and always two sides of a story around both of the characters for our video today. What we have this evening is a double feature. I feel the need to talk about the lives of these two as they are so intertwined with one another, and often when we have encountered these characters represented in our modern media, if you are indeed of the same generation that I am, then you've seen them appear together, perhaps in a very romanticized story. Well, today you get to hear the real one, at least as much as we know. Allow me to first welcome you to the channel. If it is your first time here, it is indeed a pleasure to have you with me. And if you are coming back, it's a pleasure to have you again. Now, if you are thinking that you would want to support the channel, indeed you're already doing it. Just enjoy the content. That's the best way to support me. But if you'd like to go a little bit further, click the like and subscribe, and further than that, you may refer to the video description. But now, without further ado, allow us to get started, and allow yourself to get very comfortable. First, we will speak of the life of Pocahontas, and after we are finished with that, we'll reflect on the life of John Smith. The exact birth year of Pocahontas remains a bit of a mystery to us, though historians often suggest that it would have been around 1596. Her first recorded interaction with the English came in the spring of 1608, when John Smith, the English explorer, described her in his work, A True Relation of Virginia, as a 10-year-old child. However, in a letter penned in 1616, Smith referred to her as being 12 or 13 during that same period. Well, what we do know is that Pocahontas was born to Chief Powhatan, the paramount chief of the Sessacomica, an extensive network of roughly 30 Algonquian-speaking tribes and smaller chieftains scattered across the Tidewater region of what is now the state of Virginia in the United States of America. Details about her mother are admittedly scant. We don't really know much, and her identity and status remain largely unrecorded, but she was most likely of modest social standing, The Englishman Henry Spelman, who lived among the Powhatan as an interpreter, documented that the paramount chief would typically send his wives back to their village after giving birth, providing for them until they were remarried. The fate of Pocahontas's mother is not well documented, though it is speculated that she may have died during childbirth. The oral traditions of the Mattapony Reservation, home to the descendants of the Powhatan people, hold that Pocahontas's mother was Powhatan's first wife, and that Pocahontas was named in her honor, suggesting a deeper familial significance and connection with the Powhatan lineage. But what about this name, Pocahontas? Well, the name itself is often thought of as a nickname from her childhood, and according to the colonial writer William Strachey, it translates to Little Wanton. Some interpretations lean towards a less pejorative translation, considering it to mean playful one. Strachey's narratives recount how Pocahontas as a child would frequently visit the Jamestown fort, engaging in playful activities with the other children there. She was described as spirited and lively, leading the boys to the marketplace to perform cartwheels and acrobatics, joining in with them, apparently uninhibited by her lack of clothing. Contrary to the playful and informal nature of her nickname, historian William Stith noted that her actual name was probably Matoax, a fact which Native Americans initially kept hidden from the English settlers. This secrecy was driven by a deep-rooted superstition that knowing her true name would grant the English power to harm her. But it wasn't until later, after adopting the Christian baptismal name Rebecca, that Pocahontas felt secure enough to disclose her birth name to the colonists. Of course, she is widely celebrated for her association with John Smith, the English colonist who was among the first 100 settlers that arrived in Virginia in April of 1607. Establishing their settlement on a marshy peninsula along the James River, these colonists, including Smith, frequently interacted with the indigenous peoples of the land. These encounters ranged from friendly exchanges to outright hostilities. Now in December of 1607, while Smith was exploring the nearby Chickahominy River, he was captured by a hunting party led by one Opechanacanough, and I do apologize for the pronunciations of Native American names. I did try to look some of them up, but the information is far too conflicting, so please do bear with me. Well, Opechanacanough was a close relative of Powhatan. He was taken to Werowocomoco, Powhatan's capital, where he described being treated to a great feast and engaging in lengthy discussions with Powhatan. In these early writings, specifically his 1608 account, Smith makes no mention of Pocahontas in relation to his capture, indicating that their famous encounter must have happened later. Although one historian, Margaret Huber, suggests that Powhatan's hospitality was part of a strategic plan to bring Smith and his fellow colonists under control, offering Smith authority over the town of Capahosic to keep him close and, therefore, a little more manageable. The most dramatic aspect of Smith's interaction with Pocahontas did not emerge until years later. In 1616, as Pocahontas was preparing to visit England, Smith wrote a letter to Queen Anne of Denmark, the wife of King James I, recounting his capture in a more sensational manner. He claimed that Pocahontas had saved his life at the moment of his execution by risking her own. The narrative was, however, further embellished in his 1624 publication, General History, where he detailed Pocahontas intervened as he was about to be killed. While this portrayal, written well after Pocahontas's death, has become one of the most enduring tales of her life, although its accuracy is widely debated, given its late inclusion and frankly dramatic nature compared to his earlier accounts. Of course, it's very hard for Pocahontas to say anything about it when it was released in 1624, because she had already passed away. Now, there is one other, Karen Odell Cooperman, who provides an analytical perspective on this dramatic recounting of the encounter with Pocahontas of John Smith. She suggests that Smith embellished his initial tale to craft a more compelling narrative for Queen Anne's court, potentially to enhance his reputation, which suffered after falling out of favor with the London company that founded the Jamestown settlement. According to Cooperman, Smith's revisions were strategically timed and aimed at reviving his standing within English society by portraying himself as a key figure in a dramatic, life-saving episode involving a Native American heroine. Well, despite the controversies surrounding Smith's narratives, it is widely recognized that Pocahontas played a significant role in the early days of the Jamestown colony. She is often remembered for her friendly interactions with the settlers, frequently visiting the fort and engaging with the local colonial children. Her contributions were of course critical during the colony's direst times. She brought food supplies that significantly helped those who were starving, showing once again her importance as a bridge between Native Americans and the English settlers. But it wasn't always good times. As tensions escalated due to colonial expansion threatening Powhatan lands, conflicts resumed. In late 1609, a severe gunpowder explosion injured Smith, necessitating his return to England for medical treatment. Well, we'll get back to him a little bit later. This is where he kind of leaves the story of Pocahontas for now. The colonists, perhaps to maintain peace, falsely informed the Powhatans that Smith had died. Pocahontas ceased her visits to Jamestown, believing that he was actually deceased, until her own journey with her husband John Rolfe revealed the truth. Well, Pocahontas was captured during a tumultuous period known as the First Anglo-Powhatan War, which erupted in late summer 1609 between the Native American tribes of the Powhatan Confederacy and the settlers at Jamestown. In the early stages of the conflict, the colonists secured strategic points along the James River, controlling both its mouth and the falls, while engaging in a broader campaign to assert their dominance. In March 1613, the dynamic of the war shifted when Captain Samuel Argall, exploiting regional tribal dynamics, ventured into the northern territories of Powhatan's chiefdom. It was here he encountered the Patawomecs along the Potomac River, and this was a group that was not entirely loyal to the Powhatan. At this time, Pocahontas was staying in the Patawomec village of Passapatansi, under protection of the Werowanke, the chief, also known as Japazos. Argall, with the assistance of Henry Spellman, an English interpreter who had been living among the Patawomecs, maneuvered to capture Pocahontas. Using a combination of coercion and promises of an alliance against Powhatan, Argall compelled Lopezas to lure Pocahontas aboard his ship. Oh, that's Werowance Lopesas, by the way, the chief. Now, once aboard, she was detained and held for ransom, with the colonists demanding the return of prisoners, as well as stolen weapons and tools from her father, Chief Powhatan. Although Powhatan complied by returning the prisoners, the restitution of weapons and tools was deemed insufficient by the colonists, leading to a protracted standoff with Pocahontas remaining in captivity. During her captivity, Pocahontas was held at the Henricus settlement in present-day Chesterfield County, Virginia. Accounts from this period, such as those from the colonist Ralph Haymore, suggest she was treated with considerable respect, likely due to her value in negotiations with the Powhatan rather than any general good manners or goodwill towards the natives. Now, controversially, Linwood Little Bear Costello presents an oral tradition alleging that Pocahontas endured mistreatment or even assault during her captivity. However, historian Helen Rowntree disputes this claim, arguing that such actions would have been strategically disadvantageous to the English, given the delicate nature of their relations with the Powhatan and the overwhelming numerical superiority of the Native Americans. Now, before I go any further, oral histories, of course, have value. And, well, there are a lot of societies that did not have writing, and this is how they passed down their stories. But they are subject to the same amount of criticism as any other histories, whether they be written or archaeological. So keep that in mind. We do have to hold everything to standard. Well, while in the settlement of Henricus, Pocahontas was taught about Christianity by minister Alexander Whitaker, leading to her conversion and baptism under the Christian name Rebecca. Of course, this period of her life marked a profound transformation in her affiliation and identity. The standoff culminated in March of 1614 with a violent confrontation on the Pamunkey River near Powhatan's capital at Matchcott. During negotiations facilitated by colonists, Pocahontas had a poignant exchange with her father. She criticized him for undervaluing her worth compared to mere tools, and declared her preference to remain with the colonists instead, whom she believed were frankly treating her better. The Mattapony tribe, holding a deep connection to the history of Pocahontas, preserves a tradition that presents a narrative seldom found in popular accounts of her life. According to this tradition, Pocahontas was initially married to Kokoom, who was the brother of Japazaws, the Patawomek Werowance, or chief. The Mattapony recount that the following Pocahontas' capture by the English in 1613, Kokoom was killed by the colonists. This act of violence supposedly occurred because of his connections to Pocahontas, and potentially as a retaliation or measure to sever her ties to her native roots. Following these tragic events, the Patawomecs took it upon themselves to care for Ka-Oke, the daughter of Pocahontas and Kokoom, raising her within the community after her father's death and her mother's abduction. But the historical record on Kokoom remains sparse, and once again, it's a matter of debate. William Strachey, a contemporary English writer, provides the only direct mention of Kokoom in English documents. Around 1616, he noted that Pocahontas had been married to a, and I quote, private captain called Kokoom for 2 years. This statement is intriguing because it aligns with a timeline prior to her marriage to John Rolfe in 1614. The lack of additional documentation about Kokum and his relationship with Pocahontas has led some scholars to speculate that Strachey might have been mistaken, or that his reference was simply misinterpreted. Some even suggest that Strachey could be referring to Rolfe himself, confusingly labeling him as one of Powhatan's officers. While during her captivity at Henricus, Pocahontas's life took a significant turn upon meeting John Rolfe. Rolfe had endured personal tragedy on his journey to Virginia, losing his English-born wife, Sarah Hacker, and their child during the shipwreck of the Sea Venture near the Summer Isles, now known as Bermuda. Bermuda Triangle strikes again. While in Virginia, Rolfe established Varina farms across the James River from Henricus, where he cultivated a new strain of tobacco, which would prove economically beneficial for the colony. What could possibly go wrong? Well, Rolfe was a deeply religious man, and he faced a moral dilemma regarding his feelings for Pocahontas, who had been converted to Christianity and baptized with the name Rebecca by this time. Well, despite his initial reservations about marrying someone that he considered to be a heathen, well, Rolfe's correspondence with the governor reveals his inner conflict and profound feelings. In a heartfelt letter, he articulated that his motivations for marrying Pocahontas were driven not by mere physical attraction, but by a combination of personal convictions and broader societal benefits, improving his own spiritual standing, benefiting the plantation, and of course, bringing glory to God. Thus, the couple married on the 5th of April, 1614, in a ceremony that was likely held at Jamestown, officiated by the chaplain Richard Buck. They visited Varina Farms, where their son Thomas was born on January 1615. This union marked the beginning of a period known as the Peace of Pocahontas, which lasted for 8 years, significantly easing tensions between the Jamestown settlers and the Powhatan tribes. Ralph Haymore later reflected on the positive impact of the marriage, noting that it fostered friendly commerce and trade with the Powhatan and his subjects. But of course, the marriage was not without its detractors, particularly within the British court. The union between Rolfe, a commoner, and Pocahontas, perceived as a princess and the daughter of a paramount chief, was seen as audacious and stirred controversy among the British aristocracy. I would have told them to mind their own damn business, but, well, that's just me. The London Company, which had established the Jamestown colony, was particularly invested in the Christian conversion of Native Americans as part of its broader colonial objectives. Pocahontas's conversion to Christianity and her subsequent marriage to John Rolfe were seen not only as a fulfillment of these religious goals, but also as a strategic success that helped bring an end to the First Anglo-Powhatan War. Recognizing the symbolic potential of Pocahontas's story, the London Company decided to bring her to England. You see, they aimed to showcase her as a testament to the civilizing success of the Virginia colony and the potential of the New World. So, Pocahontas, along with her husband and their son, arrived in Plymouth on June the 12th, 1616, and travelled to London, accompanied by a delegation of 11 other Powhatans, including a holy man named Tomacomo. This visit was intended to garner further investment and interest in the Virginia colony by highlighting the cultural integration and conversion of a Native American princess, as they called her. Now, while in Plymouth, Pocahontas had learned that John Smith, whom she had not seen since her first days in Virginia, was residing in London. Smith did not meet with her during her visit, but he was compelled by her presence in England to write to Queen Anne. He urged that Pocahontas be treated with the utmost dignity befitting her status, warning that any disrespect could jeopardize the favorable relations established between the English and the Powhatan people. Smith emphasized that Pocahontas's goodwill was pivotal to the English claim to a kingdom potentially established through her alliance. Thus, during her stay, Pocahontas was involved in various social functions, including a notable event on January the 5th, 1617, when she and Tomocomo attended a performance of Ben Jonson's masque, The Vision of Delight, at the banqueting house in the Palace of Whitehall. The encounter with King James was a significant moment, though it was initially underwhelming for Pocahontas and Tomocomo, who did not realize that it was actually the king of the entire country until it was later explained to them. Pocahontas, while not a princess by the standards of Powhatan culture, was indeed portrayed as such by the London Company to somewhat appeal to the English audience. This portrayal leveraged her status as the daughter of the chief Powhatan, whom the English recognized as the ruler of what they considered to be the expansive and significant empire in Virginia. There was a 1616 engraving of Pocahontas, which bears a inscription in Latin, but translated to English, it means Mataoka, alias Rebecca, daughter of the most powerful prince of the Powhatan Empire of Virginia. Remember that Mataoka, was the actual name that she had just revealed. So this representation was likely intended to enhance her stature and appeal in English society, aligning her with the familiar European concept of royal lineage. And plus, it's much more impressive to convert a princess to Christianity than just a random commoner, so it made the achievement look a lot more important. Now, Pocahontas's treatment in London suggests that she was received with a degree of respect and dignity reserved for visiting dignitaries. At the masque that she attended, her seating was noted as well placed, indicative of a respected position among the audience. Bishop John King of London reportedly provided hospitality for her that was described as exceedingly grand, and beyond what I have seen in his great hospitality afforded to other ladies. Despite these honors, not all English observers were equally impressed, and perceptions of her vary widely. Helen C. Roundtree points out that contemporary evidence does not support the notion that Pocahontas was universally regarded as royalty. Instead, she may have been seen as more of a novel figure, the Virginian woman, by the local populace. Well, Pocahontas and John Rolfe's life in England involves stays in various locales, including Brentford, Middlesex, and Rolfe's ancestral home in Hetcham, Norfolk. During a social gathering in early 1617, Pocahontas's reaction upon seeing John Smith again after many years was reportedly fraught with emotion. Smith noted that Pocahontas turned away from him without speaking, and covered her face, indicating that she was not pleased, or perhaps simply overwhelmed by the encounter. She remained isolated for several hours before they finally spoke to each other. The conversation they had was reportedly strained and reveals the depth of Pocahontas's feelings and memories of their time in Virginia. Pocahontas reminded Smith of the promises and exchanges made between him and her father, Chief Powhatan. She highlighted the reciprocal promises of sharing that had been made. Smith had assured Powhatan that what was Smith's would be his and vice versa. Pocahontas then addressed Smith as father, a term that reflected the kinship terms used previously. Smith had called her father, so she in turn used the same for Smith. This form of address discomforted Smith, who felt it inappropriate due to Pocahontas' status as a king's daughter, to which she responded assertively, affirming her intention to regard him as a father figure, insisting that it symbolized a permanent bond between them, emphasizing her continued identification with her native heritage, despite her assimilation into English society. She also conveyed to Smith that after his departure from Virginia, she and her people had been led to believe that he was dead, the truth she only just found out. Her father had even instructed Tomacomo to seek the truth out about Smith, highlighting a little bit of distrust towards the English. Well, in March 1617, as John Rolfe and Pocahontas prepared to return to Virginia, their journey was tragically cut short. Shortly after their ship departed, they reached Gravesend on the River Thames, where Pocahontas became severely ill. Her condition deteriorated rapidly, prompting her to be taken ashore in an attempt to save her life. Despite these efforts, she succumbed to her illness at the young age of approximately 21, leaving behind a legacy marked by cultural bridging and personal transformation. As accounted by John Rolfe, Pocahontas's final words were a poignant acceptance of her fate. She reportedly said, "All must die." She found solace, however, in knowing that her child would live on. The cause of her sudden demise remains a bit of a mystery for the moment, but there are theories ranging from pneumonia to smallpox and tuberculosis to more acute conditions like hemorrhagic dysentery or even poisoning. We don't really know for sure. Her funeral was held on the 21st of March, 1617, at St. George's Church in Gravesend, where she was interred, and the exact location of her grave is also uncertain due to the destruction of the original church building by fire in 1727, obscuring many historical markers. However, her memory continues to be honored in the town. Since 1958, a life-size bronze statue, a replica of the 1907 Jamestown sculpture by the American sculptor William Ordway Partridge, stands in the St. George's churchyard to this very day. Well, now that we've spoken about Pocahontas, let us discuss John Smith and talk about his life for a little bit. His early life and subsequent adventures read kind of like a tale from a bygone era of exploration and daring. He was certainly a product of his time. He was born in Willoughby, near Alford in Lincolnshire, and baptized on January the 6th, 1580. His exact birth date remains unknown. His family rented a farm from Lord Willoughby, and he boasted of ancestral ties to the ancient Smith family of Girdley, Lancashire. Educated at King Edward VI Grammar School in Louth from 1592 to 95, Smith initially embarked on a conventional path, apprenticing with a merchant in the Hanseatic League port of King's Lynn, Norfolk. However, he found this life to be mundane. This boring career of a tradesman did not suit him, and sparked his desire for a life filled with greater adventure and challenge. Smith's adventurous spirit led him to the sea at the young age of 16, following his father's death. His military career began as a mercenary in the army of Henry IV of France, participating in battles against the Spaniards for Dutch independence from King Philip II of Spain. His adventures continued across the Mediterranean, involving both trade and piracy, and extended to fighting the Ottoman Turks in the Long Turkish War. During his service for the Austrian Habsburgs in Hungary under Michael the Brave, Smith's skill as a soldier was recognized, and he was promoted to captain of the cavalry. His daring exploits peaked when he reputedly defeated and beheaded, that's right, beheaded, 3 Ottoman challengers in single combat duels during this time, earning him a knighthood from none other than the Prince of Transylvania, along with a horse and a new coat of arms adorned with the heads of 3 Turks. But his fortunes took a dramatic turn in 1602, when he was wounded in a skirmish with the Crimean Tatars. Captured and sold into slavery at a slave market, Smith was taken to Constantinople. There, he was gifted to one Charazza, who intended for him to convert to Islam and assigned him for agricultural work. However, Smith's resilience prevailed. He managed to escape after overpowering his slave master during a beating. Not good when the slaves start hitting you back, isn't it? Well, his escape was a perilous journey, of course, that took him through Ottoman territory to Muscovy, and then across the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and through parts of Europe and Africa, before he finally made it back to England in 1604. And when he got back there, he was immediately ready to embark on the next chapter of his thrilling life that would eventually lead him to the Jamestown expedition. In 1606, he joined the Virginia Company of London's ambitious venture to colonize Virginia for profit, after King James I had granted the company a charter to do so. Thus, Smith set sail aboard the Discovery, one of the 3 ships alongside the Susan Constant and the Godspeed, departing on December the 20th, 1606. His companion on his journey was a 12-year-old page named Samuel Collier. The voyage to the New World was of course fraught with discord and danger. During a resupply stop in the Canary Islands, Smith was accused of mutiny, leading Captain Christopher Newport, who commanded the expedition, to plan his execution. Thus he remained under arrest for the majority of the journey across the Atlantic. However, upon their arrival at Cape Henry on April 26, 1607, the sealed orders from the Virginia Company were unsealed, revealing Smith as one of the designated leaders of the new colony. Well, upon this revelation, they kind of thought that it was a better idea not to execute him, especially on a very loose accusation. didn't want to draw the ire of the people who put him in charge. Well, by the summer of 1607, the settlers were living in temporary housing, and frankly, they were struggling to establish themselves. On May 14, 1607, the site for Jamestown was selected by Captain Edward Maria Wingfield, the president of the council. The conditions at Jamestown were harsh. The settlers had limited food, and the swampy environment contributed to widespread disease. In fact, by September, more than 60 of the original 104 settlers had perished. The situation grew more desperate with the arrival of nearly 100 new settlers in January 1608, led by Captain Newport with the first supply. Despite these reinforcements, a fire, reportedly started by accident, destroyed much of the settlement. And that winter was particularly brutal, as the James River froze over, and the settlers were forced to live among the charred remains of their settlement. Newport's stay extended over 3 months, during which time the settlers mistakenly loaded their ships with iron pyrite, misidentifying it as valuable minerals, while food supplies dwindled. Smith recorded that more of half of the settlers died during this period. Now, Smith's exploratory efforts during the summer led to the creation of a map of the Chesapeake Bay waterways, providing a valuable resource for future explorers. However, challenges continued into October 1608, when Newport returned with 70 new settlers, including the first women and several German, Polish, and Slovak craftsmen. The only thing they were missing was additional food supplies. Plenty of new mouths, and nothing to feed them with. Newport also brought a set of counterfeit Virginia Company orders, which included ridiculous demands, such as crowning the native leader Powhatan as an emperor. Smith was reportedly quite visibly frustrated with this. Now, his leadership was further tested as he sought to secure food from the local Native Americans, often resorting to threats of military force. Desperate times, desperate measures. You know how it is. His life was reportedly in danger from plots by both settlers and Native Americans, but he was forewarned by Pocahontas. He famously declared that "He that will not work shall not eat." I believe it's a line from theologians in the Bible. It enforced a strict regime that eventually improved productivity among the settlers. In December of 1607, during a time fraught with tension and need for supplies, he was captured by the Native Americans, who took him to meet Chief Powhatan at Werowocomoco, Powhatan's principal village, situated on the north shore of the York River, about 15 miles north of Jamestown. Now, initially, it was going well. He was treated with the honors due to a guest. Smith found himself amidst significant cultural misunderstanding, however. While Chief Powhatan was away on a hunt, the others, who were lacking the means to effectively communicate with Smith, summoned their top shamans to perform a 3-day ritual to discern Smith's true intentions. This period in Smith's capture is pivotal in the mythos surrounding his relationship with the Powhatan people, particularly regarding the famed intervention by Pocahontas which we have mentioned, which is first mentioned by Smith in his letter from 1616. Now, we already know the account, so we're not going to repeat it again. But we will say that in a broader historical context, these events, regardless of their factual accuracy, underscored these complex interactions between the colonists and the Native American tribes. These interactions initially fostered a cooperative relationship, which would later be tested as the colony expanded. In 1608, Pocahontas is credited again with warning Smith of an imminent threat from Powhatan, further intertwining her legacy with his. And also that year, the arrival of Polish craftsmen marked another phase in the colony's development, with Smith reporting an incident where two Poles saved him from an attack by the Algonquian tribesmen. Now his explorations of the Chesapeake Bay in the summer of 1608, covering an impressive 3,000 miles, were critical to the understanding and mapping of the region. His voyages are commemorated by Captain John Smith Chesapeake National Historic Trail, established in 2006 to honor these significant journeys. During his absence from Jamestown, Smith entrusted the governorship to Matthew Scrivener, a well-connected but ultimately ineffectual leader. Upon Smith's return, he was elected president of the local council. Despite challenges, including some settlers' desire to abandon Jamestown and others defecting to live with the Native Americans, Smith enforced his strict policies of "he who works not, eats not." This rule, also respected by Powhatan's people, showed once again the harsh realities of survival in the new colony. But those who left eventually returned, driven by starvation, to the struggling settlement. By spring 1609, Jamestown showed signs of improvement, with constructed dwellings and cleared lands. However, a severe setback occurred in April where stored corn supplies were destroyed by rats and dampness. Desperate for food, Smith sent settlers to fish and gather, but these efforts failed to provide relief. In his frustration, Smith demanded that the settlers trade their tools and guns for food with the Native Americans, and mandated that all able persons work or face expulsion from the fort. The dire situation temporarily eased with the arrival of Samuel Argyll's ship, bringing much-needed food and wine, which Smith purchased on credit. Argyll also brought news of significant changes. The Virginia Company of London was reorganizing, and they were planning to send more supplies, settlers, and Lord Delaware to assume the governorship. In May 1609, a fleet dispatched by the Virginia Company treasurer Sir Thomas Smith set sail with about 500 colonists, including families. But tragically, one ship sank shortly after the departure, and the flagship Sea Venture was wrecked on the Bermuda Islands. The survivors, including Flotilla Admiral Sir George Somers, built two new ships, the Deliverance and Patience, and eventually they continued to Jamestown, arriving in the May of 1610. The influx of new settlers in 1609, however, overwhelmed the colony's limited resources. By May 1610, the newcomers on the Sea Venture, led by Thomas Gates, faced such scarcity that they simply decided to abandon Jamestown. This decision was reversed when they encountered Lord Delaware en route, who ordered them to return and persevere. John Smith's tenure in Virginia ended abruptly in August of 1609, after a severe gunpowder explosion injured him. He returned to England for treatment in October of that year, and he never went back to Virginia. Despite the ongoing high mortality rate from disease and starvation, With only about 150 of the 500 settlers surviving the winter, the Virginia Company continued its support, sending more settlers and maintaining the colony. In 1614, John Smith embarked on a significant voyage to the coasts of Maine and Massachusetts Bay, an expedition that led him to name the region New England. His initial objectives were ambitious, but primarily commercial, aiming to capture whales for the oil and fins they had, and to locate mines of gold or copper. However, these efforts proved to be unfeasible, leading Smith and his crew to shift focus to more practical and immediate resources, such as fishing and fur trading. During this voyage, Smith and a small group undertook a coastal expedition, trading rifles for substantial quantities of beaver skins, as well as martens and otters. Despite the setback with the primary commercial goals, Smith managed to gather a ship's cargo worth of furs, fish oil, and cod, which he brought back to England. However, the expedition was marred by the actions of Thomas Hunt, the captain of the second vessel. Hunt stayed behind, and he captured several Native Americans, including Squanto of the Patuxet tribe, to sell as slaves. Smith was deeply troubled by his actions, viewing them not only as morally reprehensible, but also strategically damaging for his plans of establishing a permanent settlement in the region. He believed that Hunt's actions were intentionally designed to sabotage Smith's colonial ambitions by inciting hostility among the local populations, thus keeping the area isolated and under the control of a select few merchants. In 1616, Smith published a map of his explorations, the first to label the area as New England. This map, significantly influenced by Prince Charles, featured English city names replacing the original Native American names, and it was instrumental in shaping the geographic nomenclature of the region. For example, the settlers of Plymouth County adopted the name New England, and others like the Charles River and Cape Ann persist even today. Now, his reflections on his American experiences offer insights into the successes and failures of the European colonial endeavors on the continent in his published work, A Description of New England, which detailed his voyages and observations. He noted that the rapid establishment of a French trading network that monopolized trade and created peaceful alliances among the previously warring native tribes contrasted sharply with the English efforts. Smith argued that the English had missed their opportunity to develop similar relations, and suggested that achieving influence in the region might now require military force, based on his extensive personal experience in both war and diplomacy. Well, he passed away on June 21st, 1631, in London. His contributions to the establishment and survival of the Jamestown colony, as well as his extensive explorations of Chesapeake Bay in New England, marked him as one of the key figures in early American history. After his death, he was laid to rest at the Saint Sepulchre without Newgate Church, located in Holborn Viaduct in London. This church, the largest parish church in the city of London, boasts a long history dating back to 1137. It serves not only as a place of worship, but as a repository of the city's history, with various monuments and memorials commemorating notable historical figures. Thus, Captain Smith's legacy is visually represented within the church by a stained glass window on the south wall dedicated to his memory. The commemorative window serves as a lasting tribute to his life and endeavors, encapsulating his enduring impact on the narrative of British maritime exploration and the early years of American settlement. Well, thank you very much, my dear listener and my dear friend who has gotten all the way to the 55-minute mark. You've done very well. And I would like to thank my top-tier patrons, Charles, Stark Factory, JC, Jeffrey, Tim, James, Erin, and Scott. Perhaps you too would like to become a top-tier patron. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed it. And I will see you here tomorrow, if you're not busy. I know I'm not. I'll be right here on YouTube for another exciting journey back into the past. Good night. See you later.